Welcome to Spectrum News at 4. I am Rita Inung coming to you live from Uyo. Let's take a look at the headlines. Vice President Kashim Shettima arrives Bauchi for Sheikh Dahiru's Bauchi's burial. ICSAN holds 6th Annual Summit in Uyo, highlights governance, AI adoption and new tax regime. Plus, ICC rejects release for Philippines ex-president Duterte. Stay tuned for details of these stories and more in a moment. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned. We begin the news this afternoon from the national scene where President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has approved the constitution of the Nigerian side of the U.S.-Nigeria Joint Working Group, JWG, as part of steps to deepen collaboration in tackling security challenges in the country. The composition of the group was part of the agreement reached during the recent trip to Washington, D.C. by a high-level Nigerian delegation led by the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu. The NSA, according to a statement, is expected to lead the Nigerian side of the group and will be supported by a multi-stakeholder team comprising senior officials from relevant government establishments. Other members of the joint working group includes the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Toga, the Minister of Defense, Mohammed Badaru, the Minister of Interior, Olubumi Tunji-Ojo, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Bernard Doro, Chief of Defense Staff, General Olufemi Oluyede, amongst others. Meanwhile, a statement by the Special Advisor to the President on Information and Strategy, Bayo Onanuga, noted that the President urged members of the JWG to work assiduously with their U.S. counterparts to ensure smooth operationalization of all agreements across the sectors. Away from that, former President Goodluck Jonathan has returned to Nigeria after being trapped in cool-heat Guinea-Bissau, where he went for election observation. Jonathan arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja yesterday, about 2 days after military officers took over power in the West African country. He arrived at the Abuja airport aboard a Guinea-Bissau government aircraft and was welcomed on the tarmac by a team of supporters and government officials. The former president was in Guinea-Bissau to monitor the presidential and parliamentary elections as head of the West African Elders Forum Observation Mission. Meanwhile, Vice President Kashim Shettima has arrived at the Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa International Airport, Bauchi, to represent President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at the funeral prayer of renowned Islamic scholar late Sheikh Dahiru Usman Bauchi. Shettima's visit comes after the death of the respected cleric who passed away on Thursday. The VP is expected to join thousands of sympathizers, religious leaders and top government officials for the burial scheduled to be held in accordance with Islamic rites. Other government officials in his entourage include the National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu, the Minister of Information Idris Mohammed, the Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare Ali Pate, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs Yusuf Toga. And from the judiciary now, where the Court of Appeal in Abuja has struck out the appeal by terrorism convict Nnamdi Kanu of the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, on grounds that it was without merit and had become academic following his conviction for terrorism by a federal high court in a judgment on November 20th. In a statement today, the judgment given by a three-member panel of the appellate court found that Kanu's claim that his fundamental human rights to human dignity FCT, rights to quality healthcare and religion were being breached by his continued detention in the facility of the Department of State Services (DSS) was no longer feasible since his conviction, life imprisonment sentence and remand in prison custody. Justice Bolukuromo Mosisugo, in the lead judgment, held that the substance of the case has become academic because since Kanu'S lawyer Maxwell Okpara confirmed at the commencement of proceedings today that his client was being held in Sokoto prison, the court could no longer order him to be moved to Kuje prison, to which he had sought to be relocated from the DSS custody. In another development, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC) has summoned the immediate past Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami. The agency's invitation was contained in a letter fixing today, November 28, for the interview. The letter, signed by Sunday Atiba Ofenimu, on behalf of the EFCC chairman, Ola Olukoyede, noted that the commission is investigating a case which they need to obtain certain information from Malami. Today's meeting will be held at the EFCC headquarters in the Institution and Research District, Jabi, in Abuja. Away from that, the Federal Capital Territories Administration (FCTA) has commenced the enforcement actions on total of 1,095 property titles in the FCT that were revoked over non-payment of ground rent, certificate of occupancy, and penalty of violation fee and land use conversion fees. The 1,095 property titles in Asokoro, Maitama, Garki and Wuse districts of the Federal Capital Territory. Reports say the owners had ignored a series of public notices made from May to November 2025 by the FCTA in national dailies, online platforms and television stations, requesting defaulters to settle their financial obligations and liabilities or risk losing their titles. This was contained in a public notice today by the FCTA and made public by the spokesperson of the FCT, Minister Nyesom Wike. And back here, the Institutes of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, on Tuesday held its 6th annual ICSAN in partnership with Ibom Air. This year's summit explored the theme, redefining governance in a dynamic regulatory era, aligning policy, compliance and corporate strategy. A key highlight of the decisions and discussions was the ongoing transition from the Federal Inland Revenue Service (FIRS) to the Nigerian Inland Revenue Service (NIRS), a major regulatory shift shaping national governance, frameworks and opening the event. His Lordship Theresa Untong introduced the theme and set the tone for discussions.
Today's gathering marks another milestone in our continued pursuit of excellence in governance, public administration, and institutional leadership. This year's summit is anchored on the theme, redefining governance in a dynamic regulatory era, aligning policy, compliance, and corporate strategy. This is a timely and strategic theme. Across Nigeria and indeed the world over, we are experiencing unprecedented regulatory shifts, rising demands for accountability, evolving expectations of corporate responsibility, and the increasing integration of digital systems into governance processes. The future belongs to institutions that can adapt, align, and innovate. So today's summit seeks to equip us for that future.
In her remarks, the President and Chairman of the Governing Council of ICSAN Nigeria, Uto Ukpana, commended the Akwa Ibom State Chapter for its diligence, commitment and exemplary organization, describing it as one of the most outstanding chapters nationwide in promoting sound governance and quality leadership. She urged organizations to embrace technological advancements, particularly artificial intelligence, to remain competitive in the fast-evolving global economy.
We're living in an era characterized by policy transitions, shifting regulatory thresholds, increased global scrutiny, and we can see what's happening in Nigeria now, and technological disruption. For organizations to remain competitive and for governance professionals to stay relevant, we must not only respond to these changes, but also anticipate, understand, and leverage them strategically. The changes place a unique responsibility on governance professionals to serve as translators between policy and practice and between regulation and operational strategy. Today's summit, therefore, provides us an ideal platform to interrogate these realities, generate actionable insights, and equip our members, and indeed all participants, with the tools and perspectives needed to navigate this new governance terrain with clarity.
Delivering a keynote address, the PDP National Publicity Secretary, Ini Ememobong, emphasized that governance must be seen as strategic functions grounded in anticipation, integration, and alignment. He urged business leaders to act in ways that harmonized political realities without compromising human values.
I believe that beyond every other factor, leadership is the vehicle that has the capacity to transform nations, companies, organizations from point to point. We have seen evidence of how transformational leadership was capable of delivering better outcomes in one nogales over the other. Everything, and they say everything rises and falls to leadership. And this is one area that I'm sure that AI will struggle with, because leadership has to juggle with subjective values. Leadership is not just about using objective facts to reach decisions, but also about how decisions feel. And the feeling has nothing to do with the objectivity. So, and you do know that the aggregation of this feeling will have not just economic impact. This accounts for why you can see that people do not care what that policy offers, they care about how they feel about that policy. Since good governance does not happen by chance, and from experience and observation, significant attainments have been made by questioning, not by following status quo. We need to intentionally create safe spaces for constructive dissent within our structure. It's difficult, but that's the only way progress can be made. And if you don't allow spaces, safe spaces for dissent, those people will leave your company and join your opponent who is willing and able to give them, and they will become your competitors.
The summit concluded with interactive panel sessions addressing key issues such as the transition from FIRS to NIRS, governance, compliance trends, and Nigeria's investment climate. Present at the event were the Vice President of ICSAN, Francis Oyewale, past Chairman of the Akwa Ibom Chapter, Andy Amos, Barrister Ime Asibong, Justice Nta Mbaba, Annie Esienet, Group Manager, Marketing and Communications at Ibom Air, Imelda Abba, Group Manager, Corporate Services at Ibom Air, Professor Idoreyin Eyo, ICSAN Treasurer, Onyeka Chu, former ICSAN President Fumi Okundayo, and the Summit Chairman Umana, represented by Victor Iyanang, amongst others. And now to Africa, where the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has suspended Guinea-Bissau from its decision-making bodies over a coup in the West African country. ECOWAS Mediation and Security Council, MSC, took the decision after an emergency meeting yesterday. The MSC said at the end of the virtual meeting under the chairmanship of Julius Madada Bayo, President of Sierra Leone and Chairperson of the Authority of ECOWAS Heads of State and Government, that the Council decides in accordance with the provisions of the ECOWAS Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance 2001 to suspend Guinea-Bissau from all ECOWAS decision-making bodies until the restoration of full and effective constitutional order in the country. Recall that military officers took over power in Guinea-Bissau on Wednesday, about 3 days after the country's disputed presidential and legislative elections. Still in Africa, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has condemned the coup d'état perpetrated by elements of the military in Guinea-Bissau. In a statement issued by Stefan Dujarric, spokesperson of the Secretary-General Guterres, he condemned any attempt to violate constitutional order. The UN chief stressed that any disregard of the will of the people who peacefully cast their vote during the November 23rd general elections constitutes an unacceptable violation of democratic principles. The Secretary-General called for the immediate and unconditional restoration of constitutional order as well as the release of all detained officials. And on the foreign scene, Donald Trump has said that he will permanently pause migration to the U.S. from all third world countries. The U.S. president wrote in a social media post that the decision would allow the U.S. system fully recover from immigration policies that had eroded the gains and living conditions of many Americans. He did not provide detail of his plan or name which countries might be affected. Trump's comment comes a day after an Afghan national was accused of shooting two members of the National Guard in Washington, D.C., one of whom, Sarah Beckstrom, has died. And still on the foreign scene, the International Criminal Court today rejected a request by former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte to be released from detention ahead of his trial on crimes against humanity during his war on drugs. Presiding Judge Los del Carmen Ibanez Cananza told a hearing that lawyers for the 80th-year-old had not laid out strong enough precautions to warrant a temporary release from custody in The Hague, where the court is based. Duterte's lawyers appealing against an earlier refusal had called for a humanitarian parole because of the state of his health. The judge said the conditions for release proposed were not sufficient to mitigate the risk it found in relation to Duterte's interim release. The court also rejected the defense's argument that Duterte should be released for humanitarian reasons. And still to come in the news. Iran to boycott 2026 World Cup draw due to U.S. visa restrictions. Stay tuned for detail of this story and more stories to come in a moment. Many thanks for staying tuned and welcome back to Spectrum News within the hour. Continuing from the business scene now, the World Bank has advised that the federal government has to urgently cut import tariffs and remove ban on some import items to reduce rising prices of goods and services. According to the World Bank Country Director for Nigeria, Matthew Verges, the measures, if applied, will reduce poverty rate. Verges, who spoke in Lagos, noted that high inflation erodes the purchasing power of millions of Nigerians in its Consumer Price Index (CPI) report for October. The National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) put the inflation rate at 16.05%, down from the September figure of 18.02%. According to the NBS, it was the 7th consecutive month of decline and the lowest in 3 years. As still in business, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has instructed all banks, payment service banks and other regulated financial institutions to immediately withdraw any advertisements or promotional material that does not comply with the established consumer protection and fair marketing standards. The directive, contained in a circular issued and signed by Olubunmi Ayodele Oni on behalf of the Director of the CBN's Compliance Department, follows a thematic industry review that revealed widespread inconsistencies in how institutions interpret disclosure, transparency and fair marketing obligations under the Consumer Protection Regulations 2019 and 2020. Guidelines on advertisements by deposit-taking financial institutions. According to the Apex Bank, the review showed that many institutions continue to publish adverts that exaggerate benefits, omit key information, obscure risk, or rely on unaudited financial statements. The CBN warned that such practices mislead customers, distort market competition, and undermine the integrity of the financial system. In health, the Ogun State government has validated and adopted a new infection prevention and control manual as part of its effort to improve patient safety, enhance healthcare workers' protection, and standardize infection control practices across all health facilities in the state. Speaking at a one-day validation and dissemination event in Abeokuta, the Commissioner for Health, Dr. Tommy Koka, described the manual as a significant milestone in the state's commitment to strengthening healthcare delivery and safeguarding the well-being of residents. Koka said the document reflects the government's resolve to institutionalize evidence-based practices, noting that strong infection control systems are critical to preventing avoidable infections, ensuring uninterrupted healthcare services, and improving outbreak preparedness. The Commissioner explained that the manual provided practical, step-by-step guidance for health workers on standard precautions, environmental hygiene, waste management, safe injection practices, and surveillance of healthcare-associated infections. And now to sports, where the Iranian Football Federation has announced that Iran is to boycott next week's World Cup finals draw in Washington because the United States refused to grant visas to several members of the delegation. Iranian sports website had claimed on Tuesday that the United States had declined issuing visas to several members of the delegation, including the president of the federation, Mehdi Taj. And still in sports, Ronaldo Trossard is a doubt of Arsenal's Crunch London derby at Chelsea on Sunday after limping out of the Gunners' Champions League win over Bayern Munich. Trossard walked off shortly before half-time with some discomfort in his left leg after receiving treatment from a member of Arsenal's medical staff. The news is a blow for manager Mikel Arteta, who has steered Arsenal to the top of both Premier League and Champions League and its standings this season despite a spate of injuries. On our entertainment news, the singer, No Sign of Weakness US tours, including tonight's performance scheduled for November 28, 2025 in the Armory in Minneapolis, was abruptly cancelled after fans failed to buy tickets. Ticketmaster announced the last-minute cancellation on its website on Thursday. Today's show was cancelled with another concert scheduled for December 1, 2025 in Chicago. While the tour organizers failed to provide a specific reason for the cancellation, the development came amid the public criticism directed at Burna Boy after he walked out a couple for sleeping during his performance in Colorado. And that's all we have for you on the news at this time. Do ensure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtvlive.ng. You have been watching Spectrum News at 4. I am Rita Inung. Enjoy the rest of your day.